A Montgomery County, Maryland police officer responded to Vivian Rice's frantic 911 call. He found a female victim dead just inside the front door. He also found a second woman dead. And a young boy, apparently murdered in his bed.
And then when you found out what happened, that July, he got ambushed by five guys. His dad was shot twice himself. He ended up, returning fire. But after the smoke cleared, his son was dead right there at his house.
That is a rapper with a double platinum record killed on the lawn of his own home while his father sat right next to him. Now listen to a man who knew the streets he came from explain that the young man could feel it coming.
So, he knew something was coming. He could feel it. There's always warning before destruction. Very few places like Miami where the sky is clear and you look up and all of a sudden rain come down. Normally some clouds to let you know some rain coming.
I need you to hold that thought because we are coming back to every piece of it. Let me start you in Bogalusa, Louisiana, a small mill town of a little under 12,000 people, where nearly everybody is related to somebody and almost nobody has money. This is where Yvorius Tykees Scott was born on July 15, 1998, the young man the world would come to know as JayDaYoungan. If you follow rap even a little, you know the name. If you do not, all you need to know for now is that he came from nothing and turned it into a double platinum single before he could legally drink for very long. His start was hard in the way a lot of Southern rap starts are hard. His mother, Letitia Jefferson, was an Army veteran who had served overseas, and because of her postings, he spent stretches of his childhood being raised by his grandmother. His father, Kenyatta Scott Sr., was locked up on drug charges not long after the boy was born and stayed gone for a big chunk of his son's early years. The two of them only got close later once the father came home, and that detail matters more than it looks like it does right now, so keep it in your back pocket. The come-up was real. He grew up on Boosie, Kevin Gates, Gucci, Chief Keef, and Lil Wayne, and he was writing his own raps as far back as 8 years old. He played high school basketball and dreamed about the NBA before his grades pulled him off the team, and by his senior year he had walked away from school entirely to chase music full-time, which broke his mother's heart at the time. Then the music actually hit. His early tapes built him a following around the region, and by 2019, his single 23 Island went double platinum with the RIAA, which is the kind of number that changes a family's whole future. He signed with Atlantic Records, he had a son, he talked in interviews about wanting his money to mean something for the people back home. To really feel the drop that was coming, you have to feel how far he climbed first, because the climb was steep. He got serious about music around 2016 and 2017, partly shaken into it after a cousin caught a long prison sentence for armed robbery, and he started uploading freestyles and tracks that got real traction around the... His first tape that mattered, Rough Way, put his name in people's mouths across the region, and from there he put out project after project at a pace that told you he was hungry in a way you could feel through the phone. In his interviews, including one with The Fader, he talked about writing from a raw and emotional place, and he kept coming back to his mother as the one person who never told him wrong and kept his head straight. He wanted the money to mean something. He talked about impact, about doing something for the town that raised him. His personal life carried the same mix of joy and weight that ran through everything else. He had a son with a woman he had dated since around 2017, and he wrapped a lot of his branding around the number 23, a nod to Michael Jordan and to family and to himself. Around the time of his death, he was with someone new, and the two of them had just gone through a devastating loss earlier that summer, the death of their infant son. So the young man sitting on that lawn in July was not some cartoon of a reckless rapper. He was a father twice over, one child buried, one child left behind. A son who had finally gotten close to the father who missed most of his childhood, and a young man carrying more grief than most people twice his age. He also never left. That is the part that folks in the culture keep coming back to. With national money and a major label behind him, he stayed planted in Bogalusa, in the same few streets, around the same faces. And while that loyalty is beautiful on a song, it is a different thing entirely when the town you refuse to leave is the town where people know exactly where you sleep at night. A man who was close to that world laid it out plainly. And this is the piece that turns his story from a success into a countdown.
He was waiting, he had 2 weeks. He had 2 weeks before his transfer would go come through, before he could leave his city. He was on a leg monitor.
To understand why the leg monitor is the whole ball game, you have to understand how deep his legal trouble had gotten by the summer of 2022. And that trouble is really the second half of his life, running right alongside the music the entire time.
The paper trail is long. Back in 2020, Harris County deputies in Texas arrested him on a family violence warrant, finding him hiding in the attic of a home, and when they searched the place, they pulled out more than $24,000 in cash, several guns, and drugs. Then came the heavier one. In September 2021, Tangipahoa Parish authorities charged him as an accessory to a second-degree murder tied to a trail ride shooting the year before, where gunfire tore into a crowd of around 100 people, and a 21-year-old named Zion Hutchison, who was not even the target, lost his life. Prosecutors pointed to a music video Scott had filmed with a key suspect just days before that shooting as part of their case. He posted a $175,000 bond and walked. The one that finally boxed him in was a gun. On October 29, 2021, a Bogalusa traffic stop turned up a loaded pistol on the floorboard under his legs while he was already under a felony indictment, which is a federal problem. He pleaded guilty to that federal gun charge on June 16, 2022, and got time served, 1 year of supervised release, and a fine. That plea is why he was on the ankle monitor. And here's the cruel little detail underneath it, the thing that man in the interview was trying to warn every young dude watching about.
Whenever you out on bond and you get a leg monitor put on you, a GPS monitoring system, your records become public. So people can Google your address where that box is.
A young man who had spent years making enemies in a small town was now legally required to sit still at a known address, unable to move, with a transfer that would have let him leave the city just 2 weeks out of reach. He was, in the most literal sense, a target that could not run. And then the 2 weeks ran out. On the evening of July 27, 2022, at around 10 minutes to 6, Scott and his father were sitting outside a home in the 600 block of Superior Avenue when the shooting started. His father would later tell TMZ that a black truck pulled up, 3 armed men jumped out, and as the 2 of them tried to run for the door, 2 more came from the side of the house. The father said he was armed himself and returned fire. When it was over, Scott had been hit at least 8 times, and his father had taken 2 rounds in the arm. The young man was rushed to the hospital, went into surgery, and did not survive. He was 24 years old. A man who spoke to him only hours earlier described what it did to him to find out. Now, here is where the official story and the family story split apart, and that split is the reason this case still burns online years later. The father described 5 gunmen and a shootout, but Bogalusa Police Chief Kendall Bullen publicly said investigators were looking for 1 shooter, a single person who came around a corner from behind the house, and the chief said the investigation did not actually show that the father returned fire at all. One story is a 5-man ambush, the other is a lone gunman in a mask. To this day, no ballistics report or footage has been put out publicly to settle which one is true. The night did not end with that one shooting either. While officers worked the scene and what they called a chaotic situation at the hospital, more gunfire broke out across Bogalusa. A vehicle got shot up a few miles away, a house near the hospital got hit, and during a chase, suspects ditched a car and threw guns out the windows, with police recovering 3 long guns.
Hey there, Katie. Javaria Scott, a rapper who goes by the stage name JayDaYoungan, was just 24 years old. In his very short music career, he was really able to make a name for himself, not just in his hometown here in Bogalusa, but also the music industry. He died last night after police say he was shot multiple times. He and another man, who family members say was his father, Kenyatta Scott Sr., were shot outside of a home on Superior Avenue. Now, Kenyatta was shot twice and injured. He's expected to be okay. He was taken to the hospital in stable condition. Now, when police were there, they also got a call of a second shooting a few minutes away near Ott and Marshall Richardson Roads. That's where they found a car shot up, but thankfully no one was hurt. And then fast forward, later in the night, a third shooting a few blocks away from Our Lady of the Angels Hospital where a home was shot up. Police Chief Kendall Bullen believes all three shootings are connected and part of a bigger issue of violence.
There seems to be two sides. When rappers, they seem to battle with each other or whatever, and you have the side that's followers of JayDaYoungan and the sides that are against them. And it appears a lot of times some of our shootings and things in the young age community are people that are on opposite sides of the rappers they follow and support.
The Associated Press reported that investigators believed the violence was retaliatory, tied to Scott's documented connection to local gang rivalries. Federal documents that came out later described him as linked to a group they called the 23 Gang, accused of moving guns and drugs and carrying out violence around Bogalusa for years, and messages referencing his death showed up on the phones of people arrested in the shootings that same night. That gang connection was not just talk from a police chief either, and it is worth understanding because it is the most documented explanation for why somebody would want him gone. The Roseland shooting he had been charged over grew out of an escalating beef between rival groups that had been playing out in music videos and on social media, the kind of feud where a slur in a song or a flexed gun in a video can end with real bodies. Federal investigators later laid all of it out in complaints against the 23 Gang and an affiliated group they called the 1400 Gang, describing years of drug trafficking and guns around Bogalusa. And the reach of it did not stop with Scott. In 2024, federal authorities indicted 16 people tied to that enterprise on racketeering charges, and 2 of them were Scott's own brothers. This was not a lone young man who happened to catch a stray. This was somebody standing at the center of a web of rivalries that had already gotten people killed in a town too small for anyone to truly hide.
His father, for what it is worth, has always rejected the gang explanation. He told reporters he believed his son died out of pure jealousy over his success, that his son had no real enemies and did not even know the men who attacked them. That belief matters because it is the foundation of the father's public account, and it stands in direct contrast to what police were describing about retaliation and rivalries. Both things cannot be the whole truth, and neither one has ever been nailed down in a courtroom. Arrests came for the second and third shootings. For the murder of Javaria Scott himself, none ever did. The case remains unsolved, and a man who watched all of this unfold offered a bleak kind of theory about why so many of these young talents keep ending up the same way.
I started looking at this shit home and said, man, maybe jail is the best thing for a lot of people. Maybe prison is a proper place for a lot of young people, because it's become a good tool for God. I'm gonna say a good place. I ain't gonna say a good tool. It's become a good place for God to preserve young black life.
An unsolved case leaves a hole, and the internet always fills a hole with a theory. That is where the title of this story comes from, and it is where you need to hear me be careful with you, because the loudest version of this online is not something any court or any police file has ever backed up. The father who was sitting right there, who took 2 bullets himself, is the person a lot of people started pointing at. And I want to walk you through exactly why and exactly where that talk runs out of proof. The father, Kenyatta Scott Sr., was not a clean record bystander. In 2021, Bogalusa police had already put out warrants for him on very serious accusations, including an allegation involving a young one and the selling of drugs to young people. and a search of his home turned up methamphetamine, nearly a kilogram of marijuana, and hundreds of ecstasy pills. So when his son died and the money and the questions started swirling, this was not a man the public was inclined to give the benefit of the doubt. Then 2025 brought the fuel. In March of that year, Scott's mother went on Instagram Live and said flat out that she believed the killing was a setup. She questioned how a single shooter could have known where to be in such a short window, and she shared her son's final words to her, saying he kissed her on the cheek and told her, "Mama, I love you, but I'm not gonna make it." At very same time, a leaked court affidavit began circulating that alleged deep and ugly family entanglements, with claims about affairs and a disputed paternity of Scott's child, claims that the child's mother publicly and forcefully denied. Mix a still unsolved murder, a fight over inheritance and a child, a mother saying setup, and a father with an ugly record, and the theory almost writes itself. But writing itself is not the same as being true, and this is where I have to keep you honest. In the mother's widely shared comments, she did not actually name the father as the person who arranged anything. No police statement, no charging document, and no court filing has ever named him as arranging his son's death. The public record still lists him only as a wounded victim of that ambush, a man shot twice in his own arm. The setup talk rests on suspicion, on the conflicting shooter counts, and on family drama that surfaced years after the fact, and none of that has been adopted by a single investigator as evidence. So the honest version of this story is not that a father was proven to have his son killed for the money. The honest version is that a son with a fortune died in an unsolved ambush, and that the silence around it has let people fill in the worst possible blank. If that pattern sounds strangely familiar, it should, because it repeats across the culture. When young Dolph was shot dead in broad daylight outside a Memphis cookie shop in 2021, another commercially successful Southern artist with street ties, the same cycle played out. A killing described as retaliation, a wave of online theories, and years of unanswered questions before charges finally firmed up. The vacuum is the point. When a young man with money dies and nobody is arrested, speculation becomes its own kind of grief. That is our first story, a rapper who could feel it coming and could not run from it, and a fortune left behind that nobody can cleanly say who really wanted. Our second family lived 1,000 miles north, in a city with a very different sound, and in this one there is no mystery about who did it or why. Here, the son did not just inherit the money, he went and took it, and then he filmed himself spending it. Chicago's uptown neighborhood in the early 2000s had a hair salon at 4141 North Broadway called Nappy Heads, and for about 15 years, the woman who ran it was one of the most beloved people on that block. Her name was Yolanda Holmes, born February 2nd, 1967, though the neighborhood mostly called her Yogi or Shorty because she barely cleared 5 feet. She was a single mother, a small business owner, a health nut who tracked her diet and rode her bike, and by every account, a genuinely warm human being. People did not just get their hair done in her chair, they confided in her. She threw back-to-school parties and handed out notebooks and pens to the neighborhood kids. And when the Wilson Yard development gave her family a stable home, she spoke publicly about how much that safety meant to her.
Her life outside the salon was just as full. She had been a cheerleader at Crane High School on the West Side, and her family loved to tell people she had even appeared in the 1986 sports comedy Wildcats, filmed partly in Chicago. She was a traveler who had filled her passport more than once, a woman who did her sister's hair every Sunday and took her nieces and nephews to water parks and bought them shoes just because. Her chair at Nappy Heads worked like a confession booth, and people did not just leave with fresh locks, they left lighter. When you hear how the neighborhood talked about her, you understand that her death did not just take a person, it took an anchor off a whole block. She had exactly one child, and she gave that child everything she had. His name was Kwamane Wilson, born December 3, 1989,
And around Chicago, he was trying to make a name as a rapper, dancer, and personality under the tag Young QC. She poured into him. Designer clothes, gold, jobs at the salon, a Camaro, and then a customized Ford Mustang. Help whenever he got into small trouble. Classmates remembered a kid who danced in the hallways and had everything he could want. And salon staff remembered a boy hanging around his mama's shop who bragged about money even as a teenager. A cousin who knew the family described the setup better than any reporter could.
His mom really was a smart businesswoman. She owned businesses, a salon, and he the only child. So like, you're not even sharing nothing with his mama. Already got him a whole thing set, and bro, it's like you see when she died, he was already set up to inherit everything she owned. Like, bro.
Sit with that line for a second, because it is the whole tragedy in one breath. He was an only child. He was already going to get all of it. Everything his mother had built with 15 years of standing on her feet doing hair was going to be his anyway. There was nothing to fight over and nobody to split it with. His father was not around to complicate it either, because his father was Jeffrey Todd Wilson, a reputed West Side gang leader who caught a natural life sentence for a 1990 arson that killed 2 people and had been locked up practically his son's entire life. So the only real force keeping Kwamane fed, clothed, and out of the streets was the same woman he would decide he could not wait on. Because that is what this came down to. Not need, not survival, impatience. Prosecutors would later say plainly that he wanted immediate access to his mother's bank accounts and life insurance so he could fund a flashy lifestyle and his rap career, rather than keep leaning on her the slow way. So he built a plan, and he pulled 2 other young people into it. One was his girlfriend, Loriana Johnson, around 23 at the time, who agreed to be the driver. The other was a friend named Eugene Spencer, around 20 years old, who agreed to do the actual killing for a promised payment. The setup was patient and cold. About a week out, according to Johnson's later testimony, Wilson asked her if she could take his friend on a run and told her he would cover the gas. Then, in the early hours of September 2nd, 2012, he called her again and asked her to bring a gun to his place, a revolver she had kept hidden in her closet. She drove it over in a book bag. Wilson took it inside, wiped it down, and handed Spencer a set of clothes on hangers and some laundry detergent, a costume so that Spencer would look like a resident carrying laundry when he walked into his mother's building. He gave him the entry details, and then, at close to 4:45 in the morning, he did the part that still makes people's stomachs turn. He called his own mother and told her he was on his way over so that she would be expecting a visitor and the door would be open. What happened inside that 4th-floor apartment was quick and brutal, and I'm going to keep the details brief out of respect. Holmes was shot in the head at close range. Wyatt woke to the gunfire and fought the intruder hard, and it was that fight and Wyatt surviving it that would eventually crack the whole thing open. The revolver jammed during the struggle and got left behind. And here's the detail that tells you exactly what kind of plan this was. Spencer, still on the phone with Wilson through an earbud, was told to make sure she was dead, and only then went back to finish. This was not a robbery that went wrong. This was a mother killed on her son's instructions in real time over the phone. By the time the sun was fully up, Yolanda Holmes was gone, and her only child was already the sole beneficiary of her accounts and 2 life insurance policies. What he did next is the reason his name is still spoken with disgust more than a decade later, and it is where his own mouth and his own cameras became the case against him.
You feel me, man? I don't play no games. You feel me? I don't play no games, man. You know, I do this for real, bro. I don't got no problem with giving back, man. I'm the only one out here with a show that's actually giving back, you feel me? And I got proof to show it, you feel me? Shout out to this fan I'm finna go slide on, man. I'm finna take care of you.
He did not lie low. He did the opposite. Within days and weeks, Wilson accessed and pulled somewhere between $70,000 and more than $90,000 from what his mother had left. He took the Mustang she gave him and had gull-wing doors put on it. He bought Air Jordans, gold chains, puppies, guns, and then he filmed himself doing it, posting videos of himself pulling stacks of cash out of the bank and throwing $100 bills to crowds he called his fans.
Sound like God, don't it? Yeah, I'm tired. And y'all got to pay y'all tithes. Call my phantom the Holy Ghost. Church on chrome will ties. Pop tags when I'm paranoid, cause a pawn shot was my paradise. I was dead pop when the powder came for that. Now I'm saved in that shoebox. Blue tops, bad bitch in that blue box.
A cousin who watched it all happen described the spectacle of it.
Bro, he had nice clothes. He had the clout. You know what I'm saying? That ain't do nothing but make him a fucking hood legend. I ain't gonna lie, cause he was acting like Mr. Beast, folks. I ain't gonna lie, he ran that bitch passing out bread. Motherfuckers ran this bitch pulling up everywhere they think he at. Last uploaded location on his story. Motherfuckers there trying to get their rent paid. Like,
and the coldest part, the part that shows you how far gone this was, is what he did in public with the story of her death. He went out and told people his mother had been the victim of a random robbery, a stranger who broke in to steal. Watch him say it in his own voice at a public event, grieving a killing he had ordered.
Kwame Wilson lost his mother to gun violence on November 14th.
My mother, she was a neighborhood woman. A guy entered her home, and murdered her, just to steal.
The same cousin remembered exactly how wrong the whole performance felt at the funeral, because in a family that small, the one person who should have been falling apart was the one holding it together a little too well.
was a cool guy. You would have never seen no shit coming from him like this on BD. So, all that shit, when it actually first happened, bro, nobody suspected that. Just off everybody knowing what they know, and nobody thought it was him. It got weird at her funeral when he was not in that bitch boo-hooing. Everybody in that bitch sobbing. Like I said, his mom was a known lady. No, I didn't, but this is, this was my cousin. My cousin got 2 kids by the nigga. She was messing with him, folks.
There is one more thing about that night that the family never got to see punished the way it should have been, and that is how hard Curtis Wyatt fought. He woke to the sound of gunfire, saw the intruder, and did not lie down. He fought the man across that apartment, took blows from the gun, and chased him out of the building. And it was that fight, and Wyatt living through it, that later let him pick Spencer out of a lineup and gave detectives the first real face to attach to the crime. A woman was killed in her sleep by her son's design, but she did not go without somebody in that room trying to save her. For over a year, the case sat cold. Police had Wyatt's account and a lineup identification of Spencer, but the thread that tied it to Wilson was buried in the phone company's records. When investigators finally pulled them, they found a second phone line attached to Holmes' own account that Wilson had been using, lighting up with calls between him, Spencer, and Johnson before, during, and after the murder. The financial records showed the money draining out right after her death. That combination flipped Wilson from a grieving son the detectives had once interviewed as a witness into the man who arranged the whole thing. In December 2013, all 3 were arrested within days of each other. Wilson, who had once sat with detectives as a grieving family member, was picked up after an investigatory alert flagged him, and in the interview room, he made a remark that would follow him all the way to sentencing. He told the detective it was supposed to be a robbery. He admitted in his own words that he had arranged something for money, and then spent the rest of the interview trying to draw a line between a robbery he ordered and a murder he claimed he never wanted. Johnson took a plea and agreed to testify. The problem for Wilson was that a man giving real-time instructions to make sure his mother was dead does not get to call it a robbery gone wrong. The way the 2 men were tried says something about how careful the state wanted to be. Wilson and Spencer went before separate juries at the same time, a setup that lets each jury hear only what applies to its own defendant. Loriana Johnson had already pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of armed robbery in exchange for her cooperation, and she took the stand and walked the jury through the run, the gun she brought over, the wiping of the weapon, and the props. The videos of Wilson throwing cash to crowds were played in court not as a curiosity, but as evidence of the motive itself, the greed that made a mother expendable. The juries did not buy it. In March 2019, Wilson and Spencer were both convicted of first-degree murder, along with the attempted murder of Wyatt and home invasion. Wilson's jury took only about 2 hours. In January 2020, Judge Stanley Sachs sentenced Wilson to 99 years and Spencer to 100. And the judge reached for a specific word for what Wilson had done. He called it matricide, the murder of one's own mother. And he pointed out that whatever the young man wanted, his mother had already given him: the car, the job, the life itself, and he chose to take hers away. Wilson stood up and told the court nobody loved his mother more than he did. A cousin summed up the raw math of it: the sum a mother's life got traded for, and it stays with you.
Y'all went and stabbed this nigga mama up. Like, nigga asked y'all to stab his mama up, y'all went and did it, folks. Like, I would've, man, bro, y'all really did that. Y'all felt that in y'all heart for, and then it made it so bad that shit was for $90,000.
Both men tried to fight it on appeal, and both lost the fights that mattered. The Illinois Appellate Court upheld Wilson's conviction in full in 2023, ruling that his statements were voluntary and that the cash-flaunting videos were fair game because they went straight to his motive. Spencer argued his 100-year sentence was really a life sentence for a young man barely out of his teens, and while the Illinois Supreme Court agreed in 2025 that he becomes eligible for parole review after 20 years, his conviction stood untouched. Wilson remains locked up under that 99-year term, and the money he killed for bought him nothing but a cell. As rare as it feels, a child arranging a parent's death for an inheritance is not brand new, and the closest parallels help you see how unusual it is for one to actually get completed. In 2010, a 19-year-old in Montana named Matthew Campbell tried to hire a hitman to kill his own mother for insurance and a recent inheritance, even drawing the man a map of her house. But the person he approached turned out to be connected to law enforcement. An undercover agent posed as the killer, and Campbell was arrested before anyone was hurt and sentenced to 5 years.
They have enough evidence that they are safe in saying that it was my brother who had done that. He had contacted an undercover FBI agent and was making plans to have him kill my mom.
Go back further to 1993 and you find Lawrence Horn, who hired a man to kill his ex-wife and disabled son to get at a roughly $1.7 million trust, and who received 3 consecutive life sentences. What makes Wilson's case stand out from both is that his went all the way through over a far smaller sum, using a friend and a girlfriend instead of a professional, and then he stood on top of the money and filmed it. That is 2 families now, both undone by a person the victim would have trusted with anything. Our third family takes that same betrayal and drops it into a quiet suburban house where the money was smaller, the cruelty was larger, and a mother's own daughter was the one holding the knife. Landover, Maryland, in Prince George's County, is the kind of place where the drama is supposed to stay small. On a modest street called Hill Road lived a 71-year-old woman named Margaret E. Craig, born October 11, 1951. A retired woman living on her pension and Social Security, described by everyone who knew her as giving, caring, and compassionate. Family called her Auntie Joyce. She had survived multiple strokes, she needed help with her medication and getting around, and her world had narrowed down to a few rooms and a phone that rang when family remembered to call. She shared that home with her adult daughter, Candace Raquel Craig, who was 44 at the time and was supposed to be her caregiver, and with her granddaughter, Celia Hardy, who was 19, along with 2 younger ones, Candace's other children. On paper, Candace was the one taking care of her mother. In reality, prosecutors would later argue, the caregiving was a cover for a scheme. Candace had been steadily draining her mother's pension, Social Security, and bank accounts, running up fraudulent charges on her credit cards. And the older woman, strokes and all, was sharp enough to notice. Strange charges kept appearing, services she had never used, and she did the thing a lifetime of hard work teaches you to do. She called her own bank to report it and protect what she had earned. There is a haunting version of this fight captured in one of the analyses of the case, where you learn the thief and the victim were quietly calling the same bank about the same account, one woman approving purchases, the other reporting them stolen. Picture it for a second.
an elderly woman, confused and frightened, calling to protect what she spent a lifetime earning, while a younger voice on other calls claimed to be her and waved those same charges through. That call to the bank, an old woman trying to guard her own money, is close to the last independent act anybody has on record for Margaret Craig. The signs that something was wrong in that house were there for anyone paying attention. Margaret had recently fallen down the basement stairs, which told you how fragile she had gotten. A cousin's daughter named Jillian Filbert stopped by the home and remembered a strong odor and trash bags strewn around a basement she described as filthy, and she left after noticing Candace and Salia watching her a little too closely. The house that had once been a stable, safe home for 3 generations was quietly falling apart, and so was the woman at the center of it. Then the noticing turned into a confrontation, and the confrontation turned into the last argument of Margaret Craig's life. According to her granddaughter's testimony, the fight on May 23, 2023 was exactly what you would expect. The grandmother caught Candace stealing and threatened to call the police, and that is when it happened. Listen to how a reporter relayed the way Salia put it to the jury.
But the star witness has been Craig's daughter, Salia Hardy. She testified her grandmother caught Craig stealing her money, telling the court, quote, "Grandma said, 'Get out. I'm going to call police,' and that's why she did it."
Salia was in the basement when it happened. What she heard first was a scream. She testified that she asked her mother what the sound was, and her mother told her something had fallen and instructed her not to go into the grandmother's room. She heard it in her own words later in the police interview, and the flatness of a 19-year-old describing the last time she heard her grandmother alive is hard to shake.
I know I heard my grandmother scream, but this was Monday. Now I know I heard her scream, but she always screamed. Like when she was to fall and stuff, she would always scream. So I asked my mother, what is that? She said that their boyfriend had something over, but all I heard was a scream. So I really don't know.
By that night, Margaret Craig was dead inside her own home, killed by the same person who managed her medication and answered when she knocked on the wall. What Candace did over the next several days to hide it is the part that turned a family tragedy into a national headline, and it is the part I am going to handle carefully. The next day, home alone, Salia went into her grandmother's room and found the body inside a blue storage bin with a bag over the head, with blood on the carpet. When her mother came back, she did not explain the death. Instead, according to Salia's testimony, she told her daughter they needed to destroy the evidence, and she laid out options that no person should ever hear from a parent, talking about using acid or burning or cutting the body up. They drove to Home Depot and a gas station for charcoal, a lighter, and a red gas can filled with gasoline. What came next was a days-long attempt to make a body disappear from a suburban backyard, and it went about as badly as you would imagine. Candace took the grill out back and tried to burn the remains, and to cover the smell, she cooked chicken on that same grill. The fire got away from her. Neighbors saw the smoke and the flames, ran over with water to help put it out, and called the fire department, and the 2 women told them it was just a tire burning. A neighbor later remembered the strange domestic scene of it, the table, the umbrella, the grill, the charcoal, all set up like a cookout in the middle of a horror.
They even had like a little table with one of the umbrellas. They had that out there. They had the grill.
When the backyard plan failed, the cover-up moved indoors and got worse. Candace ordered a chainsaw online, and here is the chilling wrinkle. She ordered it in Margaret's own name, on the dead woman's account, days after the woman was already gone. The next morning, they brought the cooled remains back inside, and in that basement, Candace used the saw. Salia testified that she heard it running, that she got physically sick, and that she saw what was left afterward. What the medical examiner would eventually receive is almost too much to say plainly, so I will keep it to the facts the court itself relied on. The remains came into the medical examiner's office in 9 bags, and examiners counted 67 separate segments, every one of them showing signs of burning and of being cut with a mechanical saw. Not every piece was ever recovered.
The reason any of this ever came to light is that a nephew would not let it go. Margaret's nephew, David Wilson, used to talk with her regularly, and when the calls stopped, he grew worried. He came by, saw her car in the driveway, but got only odd answers from Candace, noticed a large burnt patch in the woods out back, and asked for a welfare check. On June 2nd, 2023, at about 1:30 in the afternoon, officers arrived and Candace answered the door and let them in. They did not have to search hard. The smell reached them before they were through the door. In the basement, they found blood and tissue on the floor, near white trash bags, a knife, a chainsaw, and cleaning supplies. Candace's first move was to tell them her mother habitually ran away.
I know she went missing twice last year, and then January she did the same thing.
Was there a report for that?
No, she came back the third day, but she never said who she was or anything. And I kept on asking, she didn't want to tell me.
What happened next was two women taken into two separate rooms and asked the same question, and the interrogation footage is where Candace's whole story quietly falls apart.
When was the last time you seen your grandmother? On Tuesday, before I left to go to work. And you saw her last on, around what time was that when you went to work? Was it 11:30 in the morning? Yeah, before I went to work. Was she okay? Like, was it? I had to check on her to let her know I was going to work. Where was she at? She was in the In her room? Yeah. Okay. When you said you checked on her, was something wrong with her? No, I thought she was just sleeping. Okay.
So I know that your mother's missing.
Mm-hmm.
What is, kind of fill me into what's going on?
My daughter saw her on Tuesday. She said she was in the bathroom dumping her colostomy bag, and her grandma come out her room, and then she went out the front door. And then when she went out the bathroom, she realized the front door was open, so she knew she had to leave. But she didn't see her leave, but she knew she heard her.
So I saw her Tuesday, May 29th.
Yeah, she said before she went to work.
She opens by describing herself as the person her mother leaned on for everything, in the same breath as denying she knows whose body is in the house.
She calls on me for everything. I don't know whose body it is. I don't know who else's body would be in the house.
Watch how she builds a wall no doctor can knock down. She describes her mother as declining, confused, the kind of woman who might just wander off, and she is careful to keep it undiagnosed because an undiagnosed condition is one no medical record can contradict.
What is the condition of your mother?
She had a couple strokes, diabetic. She was showing signs of early dementia, but not really diagnosed. The doctor never diagnosed her.
And watch what her face does when the detective finally stops collecting rope and lays the truth on the table. Most people told this news come apart. She manages it.
So, right now, what we're investigating, we found a dismembered body. Do you know what dismembered means? Okay, so we found pieces of a body. Pieces like chopped up, like somebody's body was chopped up in bags. In the house. I can't say for sure that it's your grandmother. I don't know whose body it is. I don't know who else's body would be in the house, but she's obviously missing at this point. We'll get her. We'll get whoever it is identified, but more than likely, based off of saying that, everybody says that they haven't seen her, it probably is her. So that's what I'm a homicide detective. So that's what
In the other room, Salia's version of that same story kept quietly refusing to match her mother's. Candace's alibi needed Margaret to have been alive and walking out the front door on Tuesday morning, seen by Salia. But Salia only ever said she heard something she guessed was snoring as she passed the room, and when the detective pressed her, she could not turn that guess into a living, breathing grandmother. Then came the moment that ended it. Sitting in that room, Salia scrolled her own Amazon history and found the chainsaw order placed in her grandmother's name after her grandmother was already gone. Nobody planted it in front of her. She found it in her own hands, in the same house where it all happened. And once she saw it, the cover story stopped exactly where the evidence began.
I was looking at Amazon orders. I saw she ordered a chainsaw.
On what day was it?
I gotta look back on the order.
Was it this week though?
Yeah, it was this week. I know she ordered a chainsaw. I was asking, like, what is it for? She didn't really check me in.
The case against Candace was overwhelming by the time it reached trial in October 2024. Her own daughter took the stand in an orange jumpsuit and, in a flat, matter-of-fact voice, walked the jury through all of it. The scream, the bin, the grill, the chicken, the chainsaw. The medical examiner, Dr. Pamela Ferreira, testified that the death was a homicide by undetermined means because the body was too broken to pinpoint the exact fatal injury, but she was clear there was no evidence any natural disease had killed her. Prosecutors added something that made the money motive impossible to look away from. Forensic accounting students at the University of Maryland audited the accounts, matched the withdrawals from Margaret's money to deposits in Candace's, flagged fraudulent purchases, and even reviewed bank call recordings where a woman claiming to be Margaret sounded confused about charges she never made. The defense did not even try to argue the cover-up. They conceded the tampering and the disposal outright and put everything into the murder charge itself, standing in front of the jury with a presentation titled Reasonable Doubt. Their whole case rested on the one thing the medical examiner could not give them, a precise cause of death, and they leaned on it hard. They pointed out that only a handful of items had been tested, that the car in the driveway was never examined, that there was unidentified male DNA at the scene that could belong to somebody else, and they floated a live-in boyfriend as a possibility. They admitted Candace had lied to the police. They just insisted the jury had no idea how Margaret actually died. The jury deliberated a little over an hour before convicting Candace on all counts on November 1, 2024. In February 2025, Judge Karen Mason sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole, with prosecutors calling the crime beyond the realm of words, something that happens in movies and books and not in real life.
This was a case of a mother who was also a grandmother who was senselessly killed by her daughter, her own daughter. And in court this week, you heard testimony from Candace Craig's own daughters, who, in 2 cases, she had accused of being responsible for this crime. Words cannot express how devastated I was when I heard about this case, how angry I was, how committed my office was to getting justice.
Salia's ending was different, and the reason why is the softest part of an unbearable story. She had not taken part in the killing. Her involvement began the next day when her mother told her to help. She cooperated fully, pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact, and gave the testimony that helped convict her mother. Judge Mason sentenced her to time served, roughly 550 days already spent in jail, plus 5 years of supervised probation, citing her developmental disabilities and how easily her mother could coerce her. When she was asked on the stand why she did any of it, her answer was 3 plain words that hold the whole broken machine of that house inside them. She said she did it because her mother asked her to. The judge told her to try to make her life her grandmother's legacy. This kind of thing has a precedent too, and it is a recent one that lines up almost eerily. In January 2023, only months before Margaret Craig died, a woman named Verity Beck in Abington, Pennsylvania, an adult daughter living with her elderly parents, shot and killed both of them and then used a chainsaw to try to hide it. The motive prosecutors described was the same engine that drove the Craig case. Beck was bankrupt, living off her parents, stealing from them, and when they caught her taking money one too many times, she decided to remove the people who could hold her accountable. Her brother found the scene during a welfare check, the same way a nephew's worry uncovered Margaret's. Beck pleaded guilty but mentally ill and received life without parole.
Back in January of 2023, authorities found Reed and Miriam Beck dead inside their Abington Township home. The couple was in their 70s. Police say the Beck's son went to his parents' home to check on them because he hadn't talked to them on the phone for a week and a half. He saw a body on the floor covered with a bloody sheet, a chainsaw nearby. Court documents state the brother asked his sister if something bad had happened to their parents, and she responded yes, that things at home had been bad.
I don't believe, while everyone in the family realized that she had mental health issues, no one recognized the seriousness of it or how serious it had become.
She was sane when she killed them. She knew what she did was wrong.
Family members, including Beck's brother, were in court today. Prosecutors and the defense attorneys say everyone is pleased the case did not go to trial and that Beck will get the medical treatment she needs while serving life for both her crimes.
The differences are real. No burning, no granddaughter pulled into it, and a mental illness plea. But the core is identical. A grown child living off a parent caught stealing decides that killing is easier than getting caught. So look at what these three homes have in common when you set them side by side. Javorius Scott built a fortune, refused to leave the people he loved, and died in an unsolved ambush that left a wounded father, a grieving mother, and a fight over what he left behind that the internet turned into an accusation nobody could ever prove. Kwame Wilson was handed everything by a mother who worked 15 years to give it to him, and he had her killed over the phone rather than wait for what was already going to be his, then filmed himself throwing her life savings to strangers. Candace Craig was trusted to care for the woman who raised her, and she drained that woman's accounts, and when she got caught, she took her mother's life and then bought a chainsaw in her own name to hide what she had done. The thread running through all three is not really about rap, or Chicago, or a quiet street in Maryland. It is about the terrible closeness of money and love in a family, and how the person most trusted with both is sometimes the exact person who cannot be trusted with either. Yolanda Holmes and Margaret Craig both saw the danger and did the responsible thing, one calling the police in her own words about a stranger, the other calling her bank to flag her own child, and it didn't save either of them. Javorius Scott felt his own end coming and couldn't outrun the 2 weeks he needed. In every one of these, somebody left something behind, and somebody who should have loved them reached for it first.
Remember the man at the very start who said there is always a warning before destruction? That line turns out to fit all three of these homes, not just the first one. Javorius Scott felt his own ending coming, close enough to count the 2 weeks he needed to escape it. Yolanda Holmes told the world, in her son's own retelling, that a stranger had come to take what she had, never knowing the stranger was the child she raised. Margaret Craig picked up a phone and reported the theft that was quietly eating her life, a warning she sent to a bank that could not save her from the daughter down the hall. In every case, the sign was there. In every case, the people who could have acted on it were the same people doing the harm, and that is the coldest truth running underneath all three. There is no clean lesson that makes any of this sit easier, but there is a simple one. The people closest to your money are usually the people closest to your heart, and most of the time that is a blessing and nothing more. Once in a while it is the opposite, and the warning shows up small, in a strange charge, a story that does not add up, a grief that arrives a beat too smooth. Pay attention to the small version, because by the time it gets loud, it is already too late. Rest in peace to all three of them. If you know somebody who is quietly being taken from by the people closest to them, an older person whose money keeps vanishing, a parent handing over more than they can afford to a child who is never grateful, do not scroll past it. Say something to them while it is still small. Some of these stories started with nothing more than a bank statement nobody wanted to fight about.